What if everything you believed about Jesus was wrong? Edgar Cayce revealed something that shocks even the most devout believers. Jesus was never God incarnate. This revelation not only challenges centuries of belief, but can completely change the way you view your faith and your spiritual life. Get ready, because what you'll discover in this video is so powerful that you may never look at Jesus the same way again. Stay until the end, because the final revelation will blow your mind. When Edgar Cayce began reporting his visions and spiritual readings, many expected confirmation of traditional Christian faith. However, he brought revelations that challenged centuries of established dogma. One of the most shocking was the assertion that Jesus was not God incarnate, but rather a spirit who achieved perfection over many lifetimes. This message opened a gateway to a new interpretation of faith. Cayce described Jesus as a human being who lived in total harmony with divine laws. His life, according to the seer, was not an isolated miracle, but the culmination of a spiritual journey spanning countless lifetimes. This radically changed perspective. Jesus was not an untouchable exception, but an example of universal possibility. This idea shattered the comfort of believing in an inaccessible Messiah. By asserting that Jesus was not God, Cayce was pointing to something even greater: the presence of God in everyone. There was no need to view Christ as a distant entity, but as an energy that could be awakened in any human being. This thought was a spiritual explosion for those willing to listen. Cayce's revelation did not come to diminish Jesus, but to magnify him in a different way. Instead of a God who became man, he would be a man who became one with the divine. This reversal of perspective places in our hands the responsibility for personal transformation. Cayce transformed Jesus into a mirror of what we can become. The initial impact of these ideas was devastating to those living under the church's rigid theology. Calling Jesus a man rather than God was almost blasphemous, but Cayce insisted that his visions were not human inventions but profound spiritual revelations. The courage of this message is what makes it so powerful today. This vision continues to spark intense debate. Some see it as an attack on faith, while others see it as a liberation from the weight of dogma. Ultimately, Cayce planted the seed of an eternal reflection. Who really was Jesus? And what does this mean for the fate of humanity? Edgar Cayce saw Jesus as a supreme teacher, a spiritual guide who brought the purest manifestation of divine love into the world. But contrary to what the church preached, he did not consider him the incarnation of God himself. For Cayce, Jesus represented the ultimate victory of the human soul over the limitations of matter. The man from Nazareth was not an untouchable or unattainable being. According to Cayce, his greatness lay precisely in the fact that he was human like the rest of us. He faced temptations, pain, and trials, but overcame each one with discipline, love, and unwavering faith. This achievement elevated him to a state of full consciousness. This understanding breaks with the traditional idea of blind worship. Instead of venerating a distant God, Cayce proposes that we follow in the footsteps of a master. Jesus, in this sense, came not just to be worshipped, but to teach the path that all can follow. He would be living proof that enlightenment is possible. The difference is subtle but revolutionary. It's not about denying Jesus' sacred character, but about understanding his sacredness as the fruit of effort, not divine privilege. Cayce emphasized that we all carry the spark of the Christ within, and that our mission is to develop it until we reach the same fullness. By removing Jesus from the pedestal of only God, Cayce wasn't demeaning him, but rather elevating him even more. Because if he achieved union with the divine through his own merits, it means we can too. This vision transforms faith into a call to action and personal transformation. Before we continue, I'd love to hear from you. Where in the world are you following me today? Let me know in the comments so we can feel even more connected. The message is clear and profound. Jesus is the master who proved that divinity can be experienced in the flesh. He did not come to be unattainable, but to show the path of overcoming, surrender, and union with God. True spiritual revolution is recognizing that we follow not an isolated God, but a brother who preceded us in awakening. For Edgar Cayce, there was a fundamental distinction between the historical figure of Jesus and the energy of Christ. Jesus was the man, born in Nazareth, who traveled a journey of lives and learning until he reached spiritual perfection. Christ, on the other hand, represented a cosmic force, a divine vibration that permeates the entire universe and can be accessed by all. This view breaks with the idea that Jesus and Christ were inseparable from the beginning. Cayce explained that Christ is not a proper name, but a title symbolizing full union with the divine. Jesus achieved this state, but others could also reach the same level in different times and places. This revelation caused astonishment. While traditional theology teaches that Christ and Jesus are the same divine essence, Cayce opened the way for the understanding that Christ is greater than the figure of a single man. He is an eternal energy, sublimely manifested in Jesus but still present and active in every awakening soul. This separation radically transforms the way we view spirituality. If Christ is a universal energy, then each of us can connect to it. We don't need to wait for a single divine incarnation to guide us, for the Christ spark itself already resides within us. Jesus, in this sense, becomes the ultimate example of someone who knew how to channel this force. He demonstrated that it is possible to completely align oneself with the cosmic Christ, transforming one's life into a reflection of divine love. The greatness of his mission was to prove that the human and the divine can merge through conscious choice. This distinction between Jesus and Christ is a key to profound understanding. It removes the burden of exclusivity and gives us the possibility of also being living channels of Christ. For Cayce, the true miracle is not just that Jesus existed, but that we all have the opportunity to experience the same spiritual truth. One of Edgar Cayce's boldest ideas was to assert that Jesus did not appear on earth as a perfect being from the beginning. According to his readings, he underwent a long process of soul evolution, passing through several incarnations until becoming the teacher of Nazareth. Each life was a step toward spiritual perfection. Cayce mentioned that Jesus had lived through previous experiences under different names and cultures, always seeking to draw closer to the divine. These lives were not free from mistakes, but quite the opposite. Each error corrected was a step toward learning and purification. This insight gave a new dimension to the concept of holiness. By showing that Jesus evolved, Cayce brought the Master closer to humanity. He was not a privileged exception, but an example of perseverance and spiritual determination. Thus, his victory over temptations and his union with God become even more inspiring. He was the student who became a master, showing that the path is possible. This perspective also changes the way we view our own lives. If even Jesus faced trials in several lifetimes, why do we despair in the face of our own difficulties? Every pain, every failure, can be an essential step in the soul's evolution. Mistakes are not condemnation, but part of the learning process. Cayce described Jesus as someone who overcame the cycles of illusion and ego, achieving the purity necessary to incarnate as the Christ. This made him worthy of fully manifesting divine energy on earth. His final mission was the culmination of a long journey of spiritual growth. By understanding this process, we are invited to look at our own struggles with greater hope. If the Master walked this path and prevailed, we can too. What Cayce revealed does not diminish Jesus, but rather magnifies him by showing that his greatness was achieved through effort and love, not granted by divine privilege. One of the greatest provocations in Edgar Cayce's revelations was his view of the Trinity. For him, the idea of God the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit as an absolute unity did not hold up as taught by the Church. Cayce explained that the divinity was one but manifested in different forms of energy and consciousness, without the need for a dogmatic division. In traditional theology, the Son is presented as the incarnation of God in Jesus. But Cayce asserted that Jesus was not God made flesh, but rather a soul that achieved full union with the divine. This directly undermined the central pillar of Christian doctrine. The Trinity, therefore, was seen not as a closed dogma, but as symbols for understanding dimensions of the Spirit. This interpretation restored to humankind the ability to access God's presence without intermediaries. It was unnecessary to see Jesus as a person of the Trinity to connect with the divine. Cayce said that the spark of the Holy Spirit had already inhabited every soul since creation. What remained was to awaken it. The effect of this vision was both liberating and disturbing. Liberating because it broke with centuries of theological impositions, but disturbing because it undermined one of the most solid foundations of the Christian faith. By challenging the Trinity, Cayce placed in our hands the responsibility of seeking union with God without rigid structures. This rupture did not mean denying Jesus' sacredness, but rather repositioning it. He was the example of one who achieved the Christ-like state, not by being the second person of the Trinity, but by overcoming the human ego. True unity, according to Cayce, was not found in a dogmatic formula, but in the living experience of communion with God. Thus, his readings transform the concept of the Trinity into a call to awaken the divine within us. Instead of a distant and complex doctrine, it becomes an internal map, pointing to the possibility of each soul living in harmony with the creative source. Cayce did not destroy faith, but reinvented it. Edgar Cayce saw in Jesus not an unattainable God, but living proof that humanity can rise to the highest spiritual expression. This idea changed everything. If Jesus achieved full union with the divine, it means that every human being also carries within themselves the same possibility of ascension. This vision is deeply inspiring. Rather than placing Jesus on an untouchable pedestal, Cayce brought him closer to us. He became an older brother, showing the way with courage and love. His mission was to show that spiritual perfection is not exclusive, but a destination accessible to those who choose to evolve. Jesus faced intense challenges, faced temptations and pain, but he did not give in to defeat. Cayce emphasized that this struggle is precisely a reflection of the journey we all face. The difference is that he always chose truth, love, and obedience to divine will. By following this path, he became an example of the victory of spirit over matter. This understanding restores to human beings the power of personal transformation. Faith ceases to be merely an act of worship and becomes a practice of life. Jesus didn't ask us to be mere admirers, but followers of his conduct. Cayce recalled that he himself said, "Ye are gods," pointing to the divine capacity latent in all. By recognizing this, each difficulty we face takes on new meaning. Our trials are not punishments, but opportunities to reveal the Christ-like spark within us. If Jesus could do it, so can we. The difference is only one of degree, not essence. He simply revealed the fullness of what lies dormant in every human soul. If this content is touching your heart and adding something valuable to your life, please click the like button to boost this video and help us. This way, more people can be reached by this message of faith and hope. Thank you so much for your support. This revelation gives spirituality a revolutionary tone. Jesus ceases to be merely an object of worship and becomes a living invitation to transformation. Cayce reminds us that, more than veneration, we must follow. And on this path, faith transforms into a real experience of the divine presence within each being. Edgar Cayce's revelations inevitably clashed with the traditional church. To say that Jesus was not God incarnate was, for many theologians, an unforgivable heresy. The institution, which had sustained itself for centuries on the dogma of divine incarnation, saw Cayce as a threat to the foundations of its spiritual authority. The Church has always presented Jesus as a unique and unattainable being, chosen by God from the beginning of time. Cayce, on the other hand, spoke of a human Jesus who achieved his greatness through effort and spiritual evolution. This difference called into question the need for religious intermediaries and mandatory sacraments. If Jesus was a man who overcame human limitations, this means that anyone can follow the same path. This message took the monopoly of salvation out of the hands of the Church and placed the responsibility squarely on the individual. The spiritual freedom Cayce preached was simultaneously inspiring and dangerous to established dogma. Many religious leaders rejected his readings and accused him of distorting the faith. But Cayce insisted that his visions were not fabrications, but rather revelations from a higher source. He did not seek to create a new religion, but to shed light on forgotten truths that could renew faith at its core. This clash between revelation and tradition opened deep wounds. For some, Cayce was a modern-day prophet. For others, a deceiver who jeopardized the salvation of souls. Yet his message never ceased to resonate, because it spoke to the hearts of those who felt there was something beyond what was taught from the pulpit. The conflict remains alive today. While institutions cling to dogma, more and more people find in Cayce the courage to look to Jesus as an accessible guide. The real battle is not against the Church, but against the human mind's limitation in accepting that the divine can dwell in everyone. Among Edgar Cayce's most grandiose ideas was the notion that the Christ was not just Jesus, but a universal energy that permeates the entire cosmos. This divine force is not exclusive to one person or one era, but an eternal vibration that everyone can access when they awaken their spiritual consciousness. This revelation completely transforms the way we understand faith. Jesus would not be the only one to carry the Christ within himself, but the supreme example of one who knew how to fully manifest it. Christ is the essence of unconditional love, divine light, and universal wisdom that awaits in every soul. For Cayce, the Christ is the invisible link that connects all creation to God. It is present in the stars in nature, in inner silence, and in every act of kindness. Jesus managed to express this Christ fully, but that doesn't mean he's the only one. Other masters and seekers can also reflect this same energy. This vision frees believers from dependence on a single model. If Christ is a cosmic force, then every human being has the potential to become a bearer of this light. This elevates spirituality to a new level, where the goal is not just to worship, but to live in a way that awakens this inner presence. Many who first heard this message were frightened, as it shattered the paradigm of exclusivity. But Cayce reinforced that this was the good news. We are not condemned to be spectators of the divinity in Jesus. We can be participants in it. Christ is a universal offering, not a restricted gift. By seeing Christ as energy, faith ceases to be merely religious and becomes an experience. Every prayer, every act of love, and every victory over the ego is a way to activate this force. Cayce invites everyone to look within and realize Christ is not distant. He already lives within us, waiting to awaken. When Edgar Cayce declared that Jesus was not God incarnate, but a human being who achieved spiritual perfection, he profoundly shook the heart of the Christian faith. This vision dismantled centuries of tradition and dogma, leading believers to question what it truly meant to follow Christ. It was no longer about worshiping an unattainable figure, but about walking the same path he had walked. For many, this idea opened previously unimaginable horizons. If Jesus triumphed as a man, then each person has within themselves the chance to awaken to the same greatness. Faith ceases to be a passive act of waiting for salvation and becomes an active journey of inner transformation. This shift in perspective was like a spiritual earthquake. If this message touches your heart and inspires new insights into your life, know that every video we create here is made with great care and dedication. Our purpose is to spread spiritual knowledge, help more people awaken to their true essence, and strengthen this community of truth seekers. If this content made a difference to you, imagine how many souls can be enlightened with this same message. Here on YouTube, there is a simple and special way to support us. Through the button, "Thanks a lot." This is a way to show that this content has had a real impact on your life and to help us continue producing quality materials, bringing knowledge and inspiration to those who need it most. Every contribution, no matter how small, is a gesture of gratitude and love, and makes all the difference so we can move forward with this mission. But, regardless of anything, the most important thing is your presence here. Your engagement, comments, and support are the energy that keeps this community alive and growing. If you can contribute, we'll receive it with open hearts and immense gratitude. If you can't, your positive vibes and participation are already a great gift. Together, we are spreading more light, more love, and more knowledge to the world. Thank you so much for being part of this journey. May your journey be filled with evolution, learning, and connection with the divine. On the other hand, this revelation also brought fear and resistance. Many felt that without Jesus' absolute divinity, their faith would be meaningless. The comfort of certainty was replaced by the responsibility to evolve. Cayce's message demanded courage because it transferred the light of salvation from without to within. The impact is felt to this day. Churches and theologians continue to debate these ideas while spiritual seekers find them a source of inspiration. For some, Cayce opened doors to a freer faith, connected to the essence of the divine. For others, he touched on territory too sacred to be questioned. The result of this revelation is a clear division. On one side, the tradition that insists on the exclusivity of Jesus as God. On the other, the spirituality that sees him as an example of universal possibility. This tension shapes debates, creates new paths of faith, and keeps the flame of spiritual seeking alive. Ultimately, the greatest impact is personal. Each individual who hears Cayce's message must decide, will I continue to see Jesus as a distant God, or will I accept the challenge of following him as a teacher and brother? This question not only redefines faith, but also the destiny of the human soul. Edgar Cayce's words came not only to challenge dogma, but to issue a profound invitation. What if Jesus was not God incarnate, but a guide who showed us what we can all be? This reflection shakes our certainties, but also gives us a new chance to understand the true purpose of spirituality. If we accept this view, Jesus' life becomes much more than a distant event in the past. It becomes a living manual for transformation. His choices, his courage, his surrender to love and truth are clear signs that the divine spark is not outside of us, but within each heart. Cayce's call is straightforward. Awaken to the reality of the Christ within. Don't expect salvation to come only from outside, but recognize that you are an active part of this process. Every act of kindness, every achievement, every moment of sincere prayer is a seed that allows the Christ to blossom in your life. This invitation doesn't nullify faith, but deepens it. It ceases to be merely a ritual and becomes a living experience. By understanding Jesus as a brother and example, faith gains movement, dynamism, and purpose. We don't just worship, we follow. We don't just repeat words, but we transform attitudes. Cayce's final reflection is powerful. If Jesus could achieve union with the divine, why can't you? This question takes us out of our comfort zone and confronts us with a spiritual responsibility that cannot be ignored. Thus, the video concludes with a provocation that is also a hope. Perhaps Jesus was never God incarnate, but precisely for that reason, his message is even greater. He proved that the path is real, possible, and open to all of us. The decision to walk this path is now in our hands. We have reached the end of this revealing journey into Edgar Cayce's messages and the true identity of Jesus. What we hear here is not just a challenge to dogma, but a profound invitation to awaken spiritual consciousness. Jesus came not only to be worshipped, but to show that divinity can dwell within each of us. This is the key that can transform our lives and our faith into something living and real. And now I want to hear from you. If Cayce were right, and Jesus had never been God incarnate, but rather a teacher who proved that we can all achieve union with the divine, what would that change in your faith? Leave a comment, share your thoughts, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel, activate the bell, share this video with those who need this message, and help this truth reach more people.